Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot 93b, top of the page, with the words Ulaman the Aleph Miziknei Eido My Taimu. You got it? From the words Ulaman the Aleph. It's about a line in 7 words in, 8 words in. Okay. Ulaman die Aleph Miziknei Eido My Taimu Lior Ben Amion Esriyo Don mi dichsiv besmicha begufe mi dichtiv besmicha begufe leapoke oilas triyo tihi gufe mi oilas nidove gamra. The Gemara asks, and according to the one who said that the exclusion of a blind person is derived from the placing of hands performed by the elders of the congregation, what is the reason that he did not derive this from the burnt offering of appearance? The Gemara answers, he holds that one derives the halachot, a matter concerning which the requirement of placing hands is explicitly written with regard to that case itself, as is the case in the passage detailing the general requirement of placing hands from another matter concerning which placing hands is also explicitly written with regard to that case itself, as in the case in the passage describing the bull brought for a community-wide violation of a sin. This serves to exclude the possibility of deriving the halachot from those of the burnt offering of appearance, as the requirement to place hands upon it is not explicitly written in the Torah with regard to it, but rather it itself is derived from the requirement stated with regard to a voluntary burnt offering. Titani Tanakame de Ravi Yitzchok bar Abo Vayakre Vesaoil O Yasea Kamishpot Kamishpat Oilas Nidove Limed Al Oilas Choiva Shetunas Micho. This is as a Tana taught in a Braita in the presence of Rav Yitzchok bar Abba. If Rav Yitzchak bar Abba called his father Abba, meaning like when he was a kid and he said Abba, like father, then he would have called him by his first name. And is that permitted? If your father's name is Abba, can you call him Abba? As in father? Okay. In the presence of Rav Yitzchak bar Abba with regard to the obligatory offering brought by Aaron the high priest on the 8th day of the inauguration of the tabernacle, it is written, and the burnt offering was presented and he sacrificed in accordance with the ordinance, Leviticus 9:16. This last phrase means in accordance with the ordinance of a voluntary burnt offering. Accordingly, this verse teaches about every obligatory burnt offering, including the burnt offering of appearance that requires placing hands, just as a voluntary burnt offering does. והעבד והשליח האישה תנו הבונון ידו ולא יד עבדו ידו ולא יד שלוחו ידו ולא יד אשתו. The Mishnah states a Canaanite slave, the agent of the owner of the offering, who brings the offering on his behalf, and a woman do not place hands on their offerings. Concerning these halachos, the sages on the Braita, the term "his hand" is mentioned 3 times in Leviticus chapter 3, which details the requirement of placing hands. Each mention is expounded to exclude a different case. His hand. Leviticus 3:2, but not the hand of his Canaanite slave. His hand? Leviticus 3:8, but not the hand of his agent. His hand? Leviticus 3:13, but not the hand of his wife. Not the hand of his wife! Okay. Kol hani lamalit tzricha yikos v'ramon achad avim tel eved la bar mitzvahs. Aber shliach the bar mitzvah hu shliach shod v'kamo yisem shlis movich. The Gemara asks, why do I need all these three exclusions? The Gemara explains that all three mentions are necessary. As had the merciful one written only in one exclusion, I would say that it serves to exclude only a Canaanite slave, as since he is not commanded in mitzvahs, it is reasonable that he cannot perform the rite of placing hands. But with regard to an agent, since he is commanded in mitzvahs, and there is a principle that the halachic says of a person agent is like himself, one might say he could place his hands on the owner's behalf, and therefore fulfill the requirement. Therefore, it is necessary to have an independent source to exclude an agent. And had the merciful one taught us only these two halachot, one would have excluded only a Canaanite slave and an agent, as they are not considered like his own flesh. But with regard to his wife, who is considered like his own flesh, one might say that she places her hands on her husband's offering. Therefore, the third mention is necessary to teach that even a wife cannot fulfill the requirement on behalf of her husband. Smicha shoy mitzvah talabah v'savini yotza v'chi smicha mechaperes v'chi smicha mechaperes Elohim k'mor adam shenemar ki adam hu nefesh yichaper ki adam hu nefesh yichaper Elohim melach she'im asa smicha shoy mitzvah ma'alav v'kasav kilu Lo kiper v'chiper. The Mishnah states, right, it's a good thing there. Ki hadam hu b'nefesh yichaper. Ki hadam hu b'nefesh yichaper. Why? 833. Okay. 803. Hadam hu b'nefesh yichaper. So steht. The Mishnah states the requirement of placing hands is a non-essential mitzvah. Sages taught in a variety. And you shall place his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to effect atonement for him. Leviticus 1:4. The Bride asks, but does the rite of placing hands affect atonement? Is atonement affected only to the presentation of the blood? As it is stated with regard to blood, for the soul of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to effect atonement for your souls. For it is the blood of the soul that affects atonement. Leviticus 17:11. Leviticus 17:11. Leviticus 17:11. Rather, the verse serves to say that to you, that if one treated placing hands as though it were not an essential mitzvah, and therefore neglected to perform it, then the verse describes him blame as though he did not effect atonement. But nevertheless, in actuality, the offering atones for his sin, and he does not need to bring another offering. Okay. Elohim kapara el adam shnemar ki adam hu b'nefesh yichaper. Elohim elachshim also tzentuf asher mitzvah maleh alav katuv he will look at river. And it is not bright with regard to waving in this way. He shall take one male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to effect atonement for him. Leviticus 14:21. The bride asks, does waving the offering affect atonement? Isn't atonement affected only through the presentation of blood? As it is stated, for it is the blood of the soul that affects atonement. Leviticus 17:11. Rather, the verse serves to say to you that if one treated waving as though it were a non-essential mitzvah, and therefore neglected to perform it, then the verse ascribes him blame, as though he did not affect atonement. But nevertheless, in actuality, the offering affects atonement for his sin, and he does not need to bring another offering. Al harosh tanu abanan yado rosh lo yado letzavo yado rosh lo yado legabayim yado rosh lo yado legazeh. The Mishnah further states that the placing hands is performed by leaning on the head of the offering. The sages taught in Braita the phrase "his hand upon the head" is mentioned 3 times in Leviticus chapter 3. Each mention is expounded to exclude the possibility of performing the rite on a different part of the animal's body. Placing hands is performed with his hand upon his head, but not with his hand on the neck of the animal. With his hand upon the head, Leviticus 3:8, but not with his head on the back of the animal. With his hand upon the head, Leviticus 3:13, but not with his hand on the breast of the animal. The Gemara asks, why do I need all these 3 exclusions? The Gemara explains that all 3 mentions are necessary, as had the merciful one written. Only one exclusion, I would say, that serves to exclude only the animal's neck, as it is not level with the head of the animal. With regard to its back, which is level with its head, one might say that it is not precluded, and that one can fulfill the requirement by placing one's hands there. Therefore, it was necessary to have an independent source to exclude the animal's back. And had the Torah taught us only these 2 halachot, one would have excluded only the neck and the back, as those parts are not included in the waving of the offering, meaning they are not waved. But with regard to the animal's breast, which is included in the waving of the offering, one might say that is not precluded, and that one can fulfill the requirement of placing one's hands there. Therefore, the 3rd mention is necessary to teach that placing hands cannot be performed even on the animal's breast. Ibailehu yado tzodin mahu toshema litanya abba biro'o Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Abba Bira'a, the son of Rabbi Eliezer, Abba Bira'a. I never heard of him. Does he show up anywhere in Shas? Let's find out. Abba Bira'a? Does he show up anywhere in Shas? This is a trivia question. Abba Bira'a, does he show up anywhere in the Shas besides for Menachot 93? Sukkah 34, Abba Shaul, but not Abba Bira'a. I don't think so. This might be the only place. There's a lot of one-timers there, you know? Okay. Abba Bira'a, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Yado al-Rosh. A dilemma was raised by the sages if one places hands on the sides of the animal's head. What is the halacha? Does one fulfill the requirement of placing hands by doing so? The answer is coming here. As it is taught in Braita, Abba Bira'a, son of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, says that the verse, and he shall place his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, Leviticus 1:4, indicates that it must be done with his hand on the top of its head, and not with his hand on the sides of its head. By Rabbi Yirmiyah mitale matles ma'u shetachoitz Toshima bidvad shlo yehei davar choitz beino lebein hazevach. Talis mahu shetachoitz. Okay, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Jeremiah raises a dilemma. If one's hands are wrapped with a talis or cloth, what is the halacha as to whether the cloth is regarded as an interposition, a chatzitza, between his hands and the animal, such that it invalidates the right? The Gemara answers come in here a resolution from a brayta which states the right is valid provided there is no item that interposes between him and the offering. Well, doesn't the talis interpose? Oh, maybe it doesn't interpose. Okay, ובשתי ידיים מנוענים מילי ימנה יש לקיש אמר קרוב וסמך אהרון שתי ידיו כתיב ידו וכתיב שתי זמניו כל מקום שנאמר ידו הרי כאן שתיים עד שיפרוד לך הכתוב אחת. The Mishnah adds that the placing of hands is performed with two hands. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Reish Lakish said, as the verse states, with regard to the Yom Kippur service, and Aaron shall place both his hands upon the head of the live goat, Leviticus 16:21. The word yadav, meaning his hands, is written without the second yod, and so, if read without vowels, it reads as his hand, but it also reads it written both, which makes clear that the intention is that he must use both of his hands. This established a paradigm that in any place where it is stated in the Torah, his hand, there are two hands. There are here two hands, unless the verse explicitly specifies that there is only one. Also, Rabbi Elazar Amar Hashmaita Bevei Medrasha V'lo Amar Bishmei Reish Lakish Shamar Reish Lakish V'yikpad Amar Le Yisrael Kedaita Kol Heicha Dichtiv Yado Tantininu Lama Li Michtav Yadav Yadav. The word later Rabbi Elazar went and stated this halacha in the study hall, but he did not say it in the name of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish heard about this and became angry. He said to Rabbi Elazar, if it enters your mind that wherever it is written, his hand, the meaning is that there actually are two hands, then why do I ever need the Torah to write his hands? His hands. His hands, his hands. Yadav in the plural, which it does on numerous occasions. Akshile esrim yadav. Yadav to the yano, yadav lo shikeles yadav ishtik. Reish Lakish raised objections against him from 24 occasions where the Torah writes his hands. For example, his own hands shall bring the offering of the Lord, Leviticus 7:30. His hands, yadav, shall contend for him. You shall be a help against his adversaries, Deuteronomy 3:7. Guiding his hands, yadav, wittingly, for Menachot was the firstborn, Genesis 48:14. Rabbi Elazar was silent and he had a response. The boss said, after Reish Lakish had calmed down, he said to Rabbi Elazar, what is the reason that you did not say to me the following? When I established that paradigm, I was speaking only about the term his hands, yadav, with regard to placing hands. But with regard to other halachot, when the Torah says his hand, the reference is just to one hand. So when referring to two hands, it must say his hands. Smicha nami ksiv v'yismoch es yadav alav tzavei smicha dehem kamli. The Gemara asks, but also with regard to placing hands, it is written concerning Moses' ordination of Joshua when he placed his hands, yadav, upon him and gave him charge. Numbers 27:23, using the plural, his hands, yadav, instead of his hand, yado. The Gemara clarifies that Reish Lakish meant that one could say, when I established the paradigm, I was speaking only about the term his hands, yadav, with regard to placing hands on an animal offering, but in all other cases, if the intention is that there were two hands, the plural must be used. shochatin takev l'smicha shchita maika ama hachikama. Bimkom shesemchin shochatin shetakev l'smicha shchita. The Mishnah teaches, and in the same location in the temple that one places hands, one slaughters the animal, and immediately following the rite of placing hands, the slaughter is performed. The Gemara asks, what is the Mishnah saying? The Mishnah appears to state two distinct rulings, but if so, the first statement is superfluous, because if the slaughter immediately follows the placing of hands, then it is obvious that the animal is slaughtered without changing its location. The Gemara explains that this is what the Mishnah is saying. In the same location in the temple that one places hands, one slaughters the animal, because immediately following the rite of placing hands, the slaughter is performed. There are not two distinct rulings. Rather, the second statement is the explanation of the first. Okay, that's the Talmud New Mishnah. Choy mer besmicha b'tenufa u'b'tenufa mi besmicha she'echad beinif lechol hachaverim ve'en echad soymech lechol hachaverim. Chomer b'tenufa she'hatenufa noheges b'korbanos hayachid u'b'korbanos hatzibur. There is an aspect of greater stringency with regard to placing hands than there is with regard to waving. And there is an aspect of greater stringency with regard to waving than there is with regard to placing hands. The stringency with regard to placing hands is that if several people are partners in bringing an offering, one of them waves the offering on behalf of all the other partners, but one cannot fulfill the requirement of placing hands if he alone places hands on behalf of all the other partners. Rather, each member must place hands himself. The stringency with regard to waving is that waving is practiced in the cases of both offerings of an individual, meaning peace offerings where the breast and thigh and sacrificial portions are waved, and in the cases of communal offerings, for example, the two lambs sacrificed on Shavuot, which are waved together with the two loaves. To be continued. We'll probably start from the Mishnah again next time.